Michele McMullen, a devoted mother of two from Pennsylvania, hard-working, responsible, and deeply loved by those around her. On a quiet autumn evening in 2008, Michele seemed to vanish into thin air. Her car was found abandoned on the side of a road near Pittsburgh. Doors locked, keys gone, her phone switched off. There were no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, no goodbye. Her family's panic was immediate. Michele wasn't the kind of person who disappeared without reason. Within hours, missing person flyers spread across the state. Friends joined search parties, volunteers combed wooded areas, and police launched an investigation that soon turned desperate. Days turned into weeks. Investigators scoured her financial records. No activity, no ATM withdrawals, no calls, no social media. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. The story caught local headlines. A loving young mother, gone without a trace. Authorities feared the worst. Had she been kidnapped? Murdered? Or was there something else? Something no one wanted to believe, because as police began to dig deeper into Michele's life, tiny inconsistencies began to appear. Questions no one could quite answer. Why had she withdrawn money shortly before vanishing? Why had she taken her work laptop home that weekend? And why did it feel as if she had been preparing for something all along? Whatever the truth was, Michele McMullen was gone, and what looked like a tragic disappearance was about to twist into one of the strangest, most unexpected turns a missing person case had ever seen. As the search for Michele McMullen intensified, investigators found themselves staring at a puzzle that refused to make sense. Her abandoned car suggested a kidnapping, but there were no signs of struggle. Her personal items were gone, but oddly, her identification and credit cards were missing too. And when detectives began pulling phone and bank records, something peculiar emerged. Michele had emptied several accounts just days before she vanished. Her friends were shocked. Michele had always been the reliable one, a mother who balanced work, parenting, and community life with grace. But quietly, things hadn't been perfect. She had been under growing financial stress, juggling debt, and worrying about her job security. Family members recalled she had been distant in the weeks before disappearing. Then came the first real lead, surveillance footage showing a woman resembling Michele at a gas station, miles from where her car was found. The timestamp, hours after the time she was last seen. The image wasn't clear, but it hinted at something investigators hadn't wanted to consider, that Michele might have left on her own. Still, her family refused to believe it. She would never abandon her children, her mother told reporters. If she could call, she would. But behind the scenes, the tone of the investigation was shifting. Detectives began tracing a series of emails and online accounts tied to Michele's name. New usernames, unfamiliar login locations, and messages that hinted at a plan. They suspected identity fraud, possibly a new alias. Yet with no direct proof and no location, they could only wait. Years passed. Her children grew up without answers. Her disappearance faded from the headlines, replaced by newer stories of tragedy. To the world, Michele McMullen was just another statistic, another young woman gone too soon. But then, in 2011, 3 years after she was declared missing, a stunning phone call came in to Pennsylvania police. A tip from Louisiana, nearly 1,000 miles away. A woman working at a homeless shelter under the name Danielle Jones had been acting strangely after someone mentioned missing person cases. When staff ran a background check, something didn't add up. The impossible was about to become reality. Michele McMullen, The woman everyone thought was dead had just been found alive. When police arrived at the small Louisiana shelter in late 2011, they were expecting confusion, maybe a false lead, maybe another mistaken identity. But what they found was something stranger. A woman who looked exactly like Michele McMullen. She was thinner, older, her hair a different color. She went by the name Danielle Jones and worked quietly as a volunteer, helping others get back on their feet. Her co-workers described her as kind, but guarded. Someone who avoided cameras, kept her phone private, and never talked about her past. When detectives gently confronted her, showing a photo of Michele McMullen, she didn't flinch. She just stared for a long moment, as if seeing a ghost, her own ghost. And then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I know who that is." It was her. After years of searching, law enforcement finally confirmed through fingerprints that Danielle Jones was in fact Michele McMullen, the woman who had vanished in 2008. The news stunned everyone. Her family, her children, the community that had once prayed for her safe return. But the reunion they imagined wasn't what they got, because this wasn't a case of kidnapping or abduction. It was a case of reinvention. Authorities soon pieced together a story that felt like a movie script. Michele had left Pennsylvania voluntarily, overwhelmed by life pressures, financial struggles, the fear of losing custody of her children, and feelings of being trapped. She had decided to disappear completely. Using stolen identification from a friend, she built an entirely new life in Louisiana. For years, she lived quietly under her false name, blending into small communities, taking odd jobs, and avoiding anyone who might look too closely. She never reached out to her children or parents, even during birthdays or holidays. When investigators asked why, she said something haunting. "I thought they'd be better off without me." It was a line that shattered hearts, because on the other end of that disappearance were people who had never stopped searching. Still, this was no ordinary reunion story. There were legal consequences. Authorities charged Michele with identity theft and custodial interference for disappearing and taking on a fake name. Her case reignited debates nationwide about mental health, maternal pressure, and how someone could erase their life so completely in the digital age. But even as the truth came out, one question lingered. Had Michele McMullen truly wanted to escape? Or had she been trying to survive? When the truth about Michele McMullen finally came out, the world didn't know what to think. For years, her name had been synonymous with mystery. A missing mother feared dead, a family broken, a community haunted by unanswered questions. And now, to learn that she had been alive the entire time, living quietly under a different name, it was almost too much to believe. The reaction was explosive. News crews swarmed the small Louisiana town where Danielle Jones had built her quiet life. Neighbors who had known her as a gentle volunteer were stunned. They spoke of her kindness, her calm presence, her willingness to help others. None of them could have guessed that behind the smile was a woman running from her own past. Back in Pennsylvania, her family was torn between relief and disbelief. Her children, now older, struggled with the revelation. They had grown up thinking their mother was dead, and suddenly she was alive, but had chosen not to come back. That realization cut deeper than any headline could describe. Her parents, too, were conflicted. Her mother told reporters, through tears, "We prayed every day for her to come home. We just never imagined she didn't want to." But law enforcement couldn't simply let the case end with a tearful reunion. Michele had crossed legal lines, serious ones. She was charged with identity theft and custodial interference and taken into custody in Louisiana before being extradited back to Pennsylvania. The court proceedings painted two contrasting portraits of the same woman. To prosecutors, Michele was a manipulative fugitive, someone who had abandoned her children and stolen another woman's identity to escape her responsibilities. They portrayed her as selfish and deceitful, living under a false name while her family suffered for years. But her defense told a very different story. They described a mother crushed by impossible circumstances, a woman consumed by fear, mental exhaustion, and emotional isolation. According to court records, Michele had faced mounting financial stress and depression before disappearing. She believed she was losing control of her life, and in a desperate act, decided to wipe it away. When she spoke in court, her words were quiet but filled with pain. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong." Those words hung heavy in the courtroom. There was no easy redemption. Her children didn't rush to embrace her. Her community didn't easily forgive, and her story became a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths about human fragility, about how far someone might go to escape themselves. By the time her sentence was handed down, a relatively short prison term followed by probation, the story had already made national headlines. Talk shows debated whether she was a criminal or a victim of her own mind. Psychologists were brought in to discuss dissociative behavior and disappearing syndrome. But beyond the theories and headlines was something simpler and sadder. A mother who had lost everything, including herself. In one interview after her release, she said quietly, "You can run from your name, but not from who you are." And in those few words, she seemed to understand what she had destroyed. Not just the life she fled, but the trust, the love, and the identity she could never fully rebuild. When Michele McMullen finally walked free, the world that had once searched for her had already moved on. Years had passed. Her children were no longer small, her parents older, her name still shadowed by headlines of deception. Reporters tried to find her, to ask why she ran, why she never looked back, why she didn't even whisper a word to the family who mourned her. But Michele didn't grant interviews or chase attention. She faded again, not in disappearance this time, but in silence. Friends who'd known her as Danielle said she withdrew from public life completely. She got work quietly, stayed out of the media, and focused on healing. Her children, now adults, rarely speak publicly about their mother. Some reports suggest they eventually reached out to her, though reconciliation wasn't easy. Years of confusion, betrayal, and grief can't be undone overnight. One relative said simply, "We forgave her, but it will take time to understand her." For Michele, that seemed enough. She once told a court counselor that her biggest regret wasn't the lies or the legal trouble. It was the look in her children's eyes when they learned the truth. The pain of realizing they grew up believing she was dead. And maybe that's where her story hits hardest, not in the mystery or the manhunt, but in the human ache beneath it all. Michele's disappearance wasn't a Hollywood crime, but a quiet collapse of a woman who broke under the weight of her own life. She didn't just vanish from the world, she vanished from herself. Today, her case stands as one of the strangest in modern memory, a living example of how loss, guilt, and identity can twist together until a person no longer recognizes their reflection. She remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the missing aren't lost to others, they're lost to themselves. If you found this story moving and unbelievable, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your support helps these powerful true stories reach more people. Subscribe for more solved mysteries, emotional recoveries, and incredible real-life cases that prove truth can be stranger than fiction.